be able to keep separate the seedlings from the resprouts, because that tells us a lot about the regeneration patterns. And so the next thing is, after we've exhausted the list, and there's one other thing here that looks kind of different, and you can make up a name for that, but I can tell you now it's lotus. But if you don't remember that, just make up a name, make a card for it. And once again, don't collect it from your plot. Collect it outside the plot for your cards. Now, that's your species list for the plot. The next thing you want to do is count the numbers of individuals. Now, this might sound simple. It isn't always so simple, because plants sometimes branch out. They spread by underground rhizomes, and sometimes it's hard to tell an individual from apart. And I would just say, make your best guess and just be consistent the way you do that. And so you would just count the numbers, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
So
7, 8,
John,
9,
let
10.
me just ask you, many people can't see this, but
Okay.
this here, okay, is that 1 or 2?
Those are 2, I would
That's
say.
2. Okay. So when you're trying to count them,
That's 2.
you kind of go back, back to the main stem and count those main stems. And as John said, it might be that those 2 clovers are connected underground and genetically they're the same individual. We can't know that. We're just kind of counting them as 2. They look like 2. They're sort of acting like 2. 2 it is, right? Okay. Yep.
Now, one of the problems that we don't have right here, but eventually you will have, is these plots will get flooded with plants coming back. And there's no way you're going to sit down and count 300 plants in this plot. So what we normally do is we subdivide the plot into quarters, and we make an estimate of the number, and say we estimate there's about 30 in that quarter. And then we multiply that by 4, and that's our number. So the idea is we're not looking for precision to know exactly the number of plants coming back, but we want a good estimate of what's there. And so sometimes if there's lots, you're just going to estimate it.
Okay.
Now, that'll be, in our data sheet, we would have a species like clover. We're going to have the number of clover in the plot. And then the other thing is we want an estimate of the cover. Now, as a general rule, one way of estimating the cover, and the thing to keep in mind with cover is usually thought of as the total area around the plant. So for example, there's a lot of space between these leaves. We wouldn't worry about that. We would just talk about the cover of the whole plant. And one way of estimating the cover is that generally we think of your hand like that representing a 1/10, no, it'd be 1/100th of a plot, because this is 100.
This is
100 by 100 centimeters.
right. So this is 10,000 square centimeters, and your hand is
10 by 10, so that would be 100.
a 100. So 1% of the plot, or 100 square centimeters. And John, when you say your hand with your fingers
Just
spread,
the palm is what I'm
it's
thinking.
just this part here.
Yeah.
Okay, not the fingers.
Right.
Okay. Okay.
So if you put your hand down there and compare it with that, these two combined might represent 0.5%. Then there's a few others there. We might come up with a measure of like 5% cover.
Okay.
Now, don't fret over getting real precise numbers, because things are going to change a lot over time. So we're looking at order of magnitude changes. So we don't have to be real precise about the numbers. We just need a good estimate of what the cover was like. So I would say with this clover, maybe 5%. What would you say, Marty?
I can't see it.
That's a good way out.
Right. Come on.
When you send out a protocol, do you think we can have like the diagram of the percent cover? Like they have like the 1%, 2%, 5%, 10%.
Some examples.
Yeah, like
We can do that.
We can try and do that. Yep. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you say the total percent cover?
I'd probably do a little less, but
Yeah.
we're
Me
both
too.
hunting.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So it's somewhere
Yeah, and the
between
reason
1%
I would say
and
5 is
5%.
usually we don't subdivide below 5. We just do it in lumps of 5.
Yep.
Unless there's like just one individual, then it's really just a trace.
That's a good idea.
Do we only do the cover of the herbaceous material, or do we do shrub?
Cover of everything, yeah.
Okay,
So we would do cover for that salvia resprout.
Oh, so you do cover by species.
Yes.
Okay.
Cover by
Okay.
species.
And so for that salvia resprout, is it just the green bit, or is it
Yes,
the brown
it's
bit
just
as
the
well?
green.
Just the green.
And so that's
gonna
like
be
less than a
trace.
percent.
Right, so that's going to be trace, less than a percent. And then the clover is going to be a few percent,
Yeah.
whatever you estimate.
Yeah.
Okay?
And once again, the important thing to keep in mind is we're not looking for precision. Precision isn't going to do us much good when we're trying to make inferences about what's going on in this site. It's not going to help us to know exactly what's going on in this plot. What we want is a good measure of about what's happening. So don't worry about precision. And part of the reason is over time these are going to change radically, and you'll see big differences.
And John, let me just ask, if this in 3 months, turns into that,
Which it might, yeah.
which it might, then you would, there's a lot going on there. You just sort of do the best you can. You try and sort of say, for the clover, it's
What we would
50%
normally do
cover, or how would
is,
you deal with that?
what we normally do is we don't try and count all of the individuals in the plot.
Okay.
We divide it into quarters. We make a good estimate in this quarter, and if it's more or less homogeneous, we just multiply by 4, and that's our number.
Okay. People get that? People hear that? Okay.
Yeah.
Again, we'll.
Once again, we're not striving for precision, because precision means you'll be here a long time.
Right.
And ultimately, it won't tell us anything more if we want to make an inference about what's going on this slope. It doesn't matter what the precise numbers are here. So we're looking for a good estimate.
Okay.
Okay, and that, I think, does it for that plot.
Okay.
And then we would leave that flag in place, pick up your frame, and then we would,
Outside of your plot.
yeah, outside the plot, you count off 10.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can essentially do all the
You could, but we don't want you to be out here.
Sorry.
Okay, there's plot 2. And we orient the plot the same way. Lay it down, that corner is right there, and it's more or less parallel to our line we're measuring from. And that's plot number 2. Now, there is a single shrub in this plot, but it's not completely in the plot, but that's okay. For the intensity or severity measurement, we would use this one here because it's this diameter here. And you would basically measure that diameter there. So that's a much larger number than our last one, but that makes sense because this thing's been burned all the way to the ground. So it tells us that it was very likely much higher intensity near this site. So we'd record that. I see no resprouting shrubs, and all I see is this clover, but you're going to want to get down on the ground and search around, because at this point of the year, there's going to be things you can hardly see. There's a second species here, and that's this plant here, and it's a lotus, but if you can't remember the name lotus, don't worry about it. Just give it a name, collect it on a card. And one of the things about these cards you're collecting, you don't need to collect the same thing from every plot. Okay, you just want one example of what you're calling things. So you're going to call that clover? Fine, we already have a card. We don't need to collect it again. Also, don't feel inhibited if you see something outside the plot and you're just curious as to what it is. Feel free to make a card. Just indicate that that's outside the plot, and we'll identify it for you. So, ultimately, you'll have a little stack of cards, your herbarium, we call it, and you'll have all the names you've given it, and then we will give you the scientific names.
And John, so month after month, those cards are going to age. Can you still, you can still identify things from the leaves okay? I mean, they still look basically the same on the card. They just kind of dry out on the card.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
They
are
should
they?
be pretty permanent.
I may have already said. Are they also taking pictures of the cards and submitting them with their data, with their monthly data? So if you collect a new
Try
card,
that.
Why don't we try that?
I
mean-
prefer seeing it in the flesh, so
Yeah.
to speak.
but maybe both, just because if
But,
there
yeah,
are some
I mean, you
color
certainly want to keep
indications.
the card because that's your kind of permanent record, but also taking an image of it when you get home, and we're going to have probably a UCLA box file sort of organized so that you can submit your stuff to that, so we'll have it all in one place. Another thing that we think would be a good idea would be if before you leave the plot, you take a picture of the plot, and just again, it gives us sort of a visual representation of the percent cover, just kind of what sort of shape it's in. It helps you remember what it looked like back in January. And for that, what you want to do is just you're going to number your sites 1 through 10, okay? And then what you want to do is take a picture of it, and you can put on the back of one of your cards or on a new card or a piece of paper, just write down your name, your transect number, and the plot number. And so then it'll just be in the image with it, okay? And then if things get confused or files get misplaced, we know what's what. And I guess, well, the image should have the date stamped on it, so you don't need to write that down. Okay?
And if there's any doubt as to whether something may be different, like you come back later and the plant looks different than what you remember, don't hesitate to collect it again. We can always indicate it's the same thing but at a different stage. So we can only do that if you collect it again.
Yeah. So
Now.
make a new card for it. Yeah.
Okay, I think now
Should we date each of them?
yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
a good idea.
Yeah.
And maybe people's initials on it, because
Yes.
if we're seeing them, we're going to want to get them back to the people whose plot they built.
Yes,
Okay.
and
Maybe
what we
their
thought would
initials and plot number, or
would be a good idea is when you take a photograph of the plot with your cell phone, take one of your cards, put the plot number and your initials on it, and lay it in a corner of the plot so that if they get mixed up, we'll know who's it
Right.
is.
Yep.
Now,
Question over here?
It was more like a statement, but it's okay. I don't have to say it. I just took it back.
we like
Feel
statements.
free.
Okay. What we used to do in my forest biology class is we would completely cover the plant in tape just to make
Yes,
sure.
that's a good idea.
Yeah, just to make sure that that nothing kind of like leads over into other paper, because usually when
Right.
plants are all smushed together, it all gets all wet and all that stuff. And
Yep.
No,
That's
that's a very good idea. My assistant is new at this.
We already didn't know. See, when we work with snakes, we don't tape them down. So, but the assistant is learning. We are all lifelong learners in this
actually,
craft.
maybe what would be better is instead of Scotch tape was clear strapping tape.
Yes.
Well,
We already
you've
got
got,
the tape.
you've got Scotch tape in here. If you would like to improve upon your tape, please feel free to do so. We had to make some decisions on what we thought would work.
Okay, I think the next plot.
Sorry, we had one more.
no,
Go
I
ahead.
was just gonna say, like if you also just want to press your plants so that it's more flat, you could just put it under a book. I don't know if any of
Yeah.
y'all have done plant pressing before, but you could essentially just like
No, those
shove
are
your
very
note
good
cards in a
ideas.
textbook and just stack books on top of it so it remains flat and nice
Yes.
and neat.
botanists typically do that when they collect plants.
Right.
Like maybe we could send out like a YouTube video of like just for an index card of how to do like a mini plant press. Like,
Yeah, I mean, basically you stick it under a book, right?
yeah.
Done.
It seems to me you know what you're doing with this. Maybe you could make us a short little video and send it out.
Could you do that?
Great.
That would be great.
Thanks.
That would be great.
No problem.
Good. Okay, great.
Okay, now, I think at this point, we want to volunteer. Okay, here's our volunteer. And you need a partner. Okay? I want you guys to lay down plot number 3. Do we have any more flags?
We will.
Oh, okay.
By the time you're at plot 3, we will.
So
start on this
you're going to
corner,
be
right?
teaching how to the rest of the class how to do this. So make sure you articulate, and you're stepping in your plot.
Yeah.
That's a no-no.
So actually, I was going to mention that. So these are long-term plots, and when you start to do measurements on long-term plots, you really want to avoid the disturbance of the area that you're measuring. So think about where your transect's going to be, and always, actually, if you're going to be setting it off of a marker, then always work on the downside or between your landmark, and just always be conscious. Do not step in the plot. Do not step in the plot.
So we can go either this way or that way,
We're going to
okay, so
we're going to do 100 meters parallel to whatever trail, or in this case, drainage ditch.
alright, stop there at the
flag.
He's getting one.
So it should be
Now,
approximately
here's
the same
a-
distance from that
here's
ditch.
another point that's worth bringing up. If, for example, you counted out and your plot landed right on this is some artifact from people, you would not want to lay your plot down there. So you would have a standard protocol, which would be like, you'll make the plot 1 meter beyond the 10 to avoid this artifact here. And if your plot ended up right across this disturbance here, which is some erosion barrier or something that was laid down, we don't want to measure anything within there because there's disturbance we can't account for. So you would have a standard protocol that you will go 1 meter beyond there and lay your plot down, and just record that in your data sheet that your plot number 3 was 11 meters, not 10, or 11 paces, not 10, in order to avoid a disturbance.
I have a question. If we were to do that for the next plot, do we still go 10 or do we go 9?
I think we'll just stick with the same protocol and go 10. Yeah.
Thank you.
Alright, so now we're gonna measure a twig.
Now, one thing to point out. When you lay down the plot, you got the corner right, but the one thing you want to do is make this side here parallel to whatever you're measuring off of, and it looks like it's headed right towards that drainage canal. So I would orient it a little more like this. There you go. Maybe that's a little too much.
And
There,
remember,
and that's just right.
it's important because when you come back in a month, you're going to you want to get it in the same place, and you've only got one point, one orientation point. So that means getting that parallel in a way that you can repeat is quite important, because you could swing it way over the other in other directions. So make sure you're really kind of giving yourself that as a mental reference point, and you're being careful about it, so that you can redo it every time.
You guys might want to download like a compass app, just so it might make it easier to orient this thing in the right way every time.
Yeah, that is a very good idea.
Yep. And the other thing you can do, if you want, is you could put a rock over on that corner or something like that, and then use those two. We don't want to have the whole hillside festooned with pink flags. So we don't want 4 pink flags out, because it's just an attractive nuisance, as John has said. So I think just 1 flag subtly placed in the soil is good, but if you want to put other markers that are more natural, you certainly can. Okay,
Okay, so what do you do now?
So we measure our twigs at the thinnest one we can find.
Without ever stepping inside, right?
So going around, so you can... This one's pretty thin, right here.